Vanished in 45 seconds. The impossible case of Barbara Bollock. On a clear summer morning, on a familiar mountain trail, a woman is walking just a few feet ahead of her friend. He stops, for less than a minute, to look back at the view. When he turns around, she's gone. There was no scream, no sound of a struggle, no cry for help. No footprints, no broken branches, no trace she was ever there. This isn't the opening to a thriller movie. This is the true story of how 55-year-old Barbara Bollock vanished from a popular hiking trail in the time it takes to look away and look back. It's a case that defies all logic, challenges our sense of security in the wild, and remains one of the most baffling mysteries in American history. How does an experienced hiker just disappear into thin air? How do they leave behind absolutely nothing for search dogs to track, for investigators to analyze, or for a heartbroken family to hold on to? This is a story with far more questions than answers, a puzzle where every single piece seems to be missing. Today, we're exploring the impossible timeline, the massive but fruitless search, and the deeply unsettling theories behind the disappearance of Barbara Bollock. And as we do, we'll ask the same question that has haunted her family and law enforcement for years. What happened on that mountain? Before we get into all the details, if you find yourself drawn to these kinds of perplexing, unsolved cases, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. We work to bring respectful and in-depth storytelling to cases that deserve to be remembered. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Section 1. A Life Rooted in the Mountains. To understand just how impossible Barbara Bollock's disappearance seems, you first have to understand the woman herself. Barbara wasn't some novice tourist who got lost. She was a woman who had found her home in the rugged grandeur of Montana's Bitterroot Valley. Born in 1951, she spent her early life far from the mountains. She met her husband, Carl Bollock, while he was in the Air Force, and he went on to a long career with J.P. Morgan Chase Bank in New York, becoming vice president and assistant director of security operations. For years, they lived a fast-paced corporate life. But Carl was a Montana native, and he always dreamed of going back. In 2001, after Carl retired, they made it happen. They moved to the small town of Corvallis, Montana, right in the heart of the Bitterroot Valley. At first, it was a big change for Barbara. But then she discovered the mountains, and she fell in love. The towering peaks and dense forests captivated her. She told her husband, "This is the place I want to be." At 5 feet tall and 115 pounds, Barbara might have seemed small against the vast landscape, but she was tough, energetic, and a natural athlete. She became an avid, almost daily, hiker. She knew the trails, the risks, and the rewards. After her husband, Carl, had a heart attack, he couldn't join her on the tougher hikes, so Barbara often went alone. But she wasn't reckless. Friends and family said she was extremely cautious, with a healthy fear of heights that made her extra careful near cliffs. She was always prepared, carrying a black daypack with supplies and a .357 Magnum for protection against bears or mountain lions. This was not a woman who took foolish risks. By all accounts, Barbara Bollock was deeply happy. She had no known troubles or reasons to leave. She was taking flying lessons, learning to ski, and planning a trip to Mexico with Carl. She adored her pets, especially a dog she'd adopted. She was in love with her life, her husband, and her home in the mountains. One of her favorite spots was a trail she knew like the back of her hand, the Bear Creek Overlook. Section 2. The Day of the Disappearance. Wednesday, July 18, 2007, was a perfect day for a hike. Visiting the Bollocks were Carl's cousin, Donna, and her boyfriend, a 58-year-old man from California named Jim Ramaker. The plan was for Barbara to take both of them on the Bear Creek Overlook Trail. But after a late night, Donna was feeling hungover and decided to stay home. So, just Barbara and Jim headed out that morning. Sometime between 8:30 and 9 a.m., Barbara told Carl they were leaving for the trail. He expected them back for lunch. It was the last time he ever saw his wife. The drive to the trailhead was short. When they arrived, they found the road was temporarily closed for construction. As they waited, they saw two young men with a black, collie-like dog walk past the crew and head up the trail. The construction workers remembered them. Two fit, tan men in their early 20s. After getting past the construction, Barbara and Jim started their hike up the 2.6-mile trail. It winds through pine forests and across sections of loose shale rock. the kind of rock that crunches loudly under your feet. They made it to the scenic overlook at the top. According to Jim, they spent some time enjoying the view and ran into the same two young men they'd seen earlier. He said the four of them chatted for about half an hour before the two men started heading back down. Around 11:30 a.m., Barbara and Jim began their own descent, with Barbara in the lead. And this is where the timeline shrinks from hours to just seconds. This is where the story fractures. Jim Ramaker said that as they were walking, with Barbara just 20 to 30 feet ahead of him, he stopped to take one last look at the view behind them. He estimated he paused for no more than 45 seconds to a minute. A brief, insignificant moment. But when he turned back to the trail, the space where Barbara should have been was empty. She was gone. There had been no sound at all. No shout. No yelp of surprise. No noise of a fall on the crunchy shale rock. No rustle in the bushes. Just silence. The world, which had been perfectly normal a moment before, was now terrifyingly wrong. Section 3. The impossible timeline and the fruitless search. In that first moment of confusion, Jim likely couldn't process what he was seeing. 1 second, she was there. The next, she wasn't. He called her name. Only the silence of the mountains answered. He looked around the immediate area, checking the edges of the trail, but saw no sign of her. Thinking she must have just gotten ahead of him, he continued down to the trailhead. But when he got to their vehicle, she wasn't there. The confusion turned to panic. He hiked all the way back up to the overlook, calling her name, searching for any sign of what could have happened. Still nothing. Finally, accepting something was terribly wrong, Jim went to the construction site and asked the crew if they'd seen Barbara. They hadn't. A worker let him use a phone to report her missing. Back at home, Carl Bollock was starting to worry. When the phone rang around 2 p.m., it was a Forest Service law enforcement officer. She asked him a question that would shatter his world. "Is your wife's name Barbara?" Carl's first reaction was denial. "No way," he told her. He was sure that if anyone was lost, it had to be Jim, the out-of-towner, not his wife who knew these mountains so well. Carl drove straight to the trailhead, certain it was all a misunderstanding. But Barbara wasn't there. He stayed until midnight, as his hope faded with the setting sun, before search teams urged him to go home. The next morning, he was back, joining what was quickly becoming one of the most extensive search operations in Montana's history. The official search was massive. Ravalli County Search and Rescue, teams from Missoula County, the U.S. Forest Service, and countless volunteers were all involved. They used every tool they had. Ground teams on foot and horseback combed the rugged terrain. Aircraft with advanced infrared and thermal imaging scanned the forest from above, searching for any heat signature. Most importantly, they brought in highly trained scent dogs. These dogs can typically follow even the faintest scent trail. They were taken to the exact spot where Jim said he last saw Barbara. The result was dumbfounding. The dogs couldn't pick up her scent. It was as if she had simply vanished from the trail. Days stretched into weeks. The searchers found nothing. Not one footprint. Not a single thread from her clothes. Not her black daypack or the .357 Magnum inside it. There were no broken branches, no slide marks in the dirt. There was absolutely no physical evidence to explain what happened to her, or even prove she was there at all. After 2 exhaustive weeks, a bewildered Ravalli County Sheriff, Chris Hoffman, told the press, "We are perplexed. We have combed the area very well. No trace at all has been found. We would like to verify, if we can, that Bollock was even on the mountain that day." His statement highlighted the maddening core of the case. The only witness to Barbara even being on that trail was the last person to see her. Section 4. The theories, a labyrinth of dead ends. When a person vanishes and the evidence does too, you're left navigating a maze of theories. In Barbara Bollock's case, every potential path seems to hit a dead end. Theory 1. A tragic accident. The simplest explanation is usually an accident. The Bear Creek Trail has steep sections and loose rock. Could she have just slipped and fallen somewhere hidden? This theory runs into problems right away. First, Barbara was an experienced hiker who knew this trail intimately and had a documented fear of heights, making her extra cautious. A careless slip seems out of character. Then, there's the sound. The trail is covered in loose shale. A fall or a slide would have been loud. A cascade of rocks, snapping branches, a cry of pain. Jim, standing just 20 to 30 feet away, should have heard something. but he heard only silence. How does someone fall down a mountain without making a sound? Finally, there's the total lack of physical evidence. The massive search found nothing. Not a drop of blood, not a torn piece of her daypack. Professional search teams were certain. If there was something to find in that area, they would have found it. It was as if she was plucked from the trail. Some suggested an animal attack, but that's even less likely. An attack from a bear or mountain lion would be violent and incredibly loud. Jim would have heard a struggle, and Barbara was armed. Searchers would have found obvious signs. They found none. Theory 2, foul play. When an accident seems impossible, suspicion turns to foul play. The first person investigators always look at is the last one to see the victim. In this case, that was Jim Ramaker. His story sounds unbelievable. A person vanishes in under a minute? Investigators looked at him very closely. He cooperated fully, and according to multiple reports, even volunteered to take a polygraph test, though authorities declined. With no motive and no evidence of a crime, law enforcement officially cleared Jim as a suspect. That leaves a stranger, an attacker waiting on the trail. This brings us back to the two unidentified men. These men, seen by a construction crew and by Jim, are ghosts in this story. Police desperately wanted to talk to them, if only to confirm Jim's story that Barbara was on the mountain. Despite a $10,000 reward, these two men have never been identified and never came forward. But the logistics of a silent, traceless abduction of an armed woman in broad daylight seemed just as impossible as an accident. Theory 3, voluntary disappearance. Could Barbara have just walked away from her own life? This is the theory her family and investigators find least plausible. All signs pointed to a happy, content life. She loved her husband, her home, and her pets. She was excited about getting her pilot's license and an upcoming trip. Critically, she left everything behind: her wallet, ID, and passport. Her bank accounts were never touched. Her husband, Carl, was adamant that she would never have abandoned her beloved pets. Starting a new life with no money or identification is nearly impossible. For her to have planned it and pulled it off so perfectly seems to defy all logic. Each theory is a dead end. An accident seems impossible. Foul play seems impossible. Walking away seems impossible. What's left is a vacuum, an absence of evidence, and the enduring absence of Barbara Bolick. Section 5. A legacy of unanswered questions. The disappearance of Barbara Bolick left a scar on her family and community. For her husband, Carl, the following years were a special kind of torture. From his kitchen table, he could look out and see the very mountains that had swallowed his wife. A man who'd spent his career in global security, dealing with logic and risk, was now faced with a completely illogical mystery. He lost 35 pounds that first summer, devastated by the uncertainty. He told reporters, "I just couldn't accept it. I just knew she was going to show up, one way or another, but it didn't happen. I don't have the answers. I wish I did. There's just nothing. That's what's so perplexing." The strain eventually fractured family relationships. Carl Bolick passed away in 2021, at the age of 80, never knowing what happened to the woman he loved. The case also took a heavy toll on Jim Ramaker. Though cleared by police, he lived for years under a cloud of public suspicion. He maintained his story, but the event forever tied him to one of Montana's most haunting mysteries. The case has also drawn attention from those who study high strangeness, like the Missing 411 phenomenon, which catalogs unusual disappearances in national parks and forests. While these ideas are speculative, their existence speaks to how inadequate all conventional explanations are. When logic fails so completely, people start looking for answers beyond the ordinary. Years have passed. Hunters have walked those woods. Seasons have come and gone, yet not one shred of evidence has ever surfaced. Barbara Bolick's disappearance remains an active, open case with the Ravalli County Sheriff's Office, a mystery that still perplexes them today. The story of Barbara Bolick ends exactly where it begins, on a mountain trail, in a sliver of time that measures less than a minute. A 55-year-old woman just steps from her friend, walks into an unseen void, leaving nothing behind but an impossible question. She didn't seem to fall, she wasn't obviously taken, and she didn't walk away, because all of those things should have left a trace. A sound, a footprint, a clue. The silence she left behind is the most terrifying part of this story. It's a silence that has screamed for answers for over a decade. It's a silence that confounded seasoned investigators and broke a family apart. The wilderness can be dangerous, but the disappearance of Barbara Bollock seems to defy the normal rules of both nature and logic. It challenges the basic idea that a person can't just cease to exist. Her case is a chilling reminder that sometimes the world presents us with a puzzle so perfect in its lack of clues that it may never be solved. And so, the mystery of the woman who vanished in 45 seconds endures, hanging over the beautiful, silent peaks of the Bitterroot Mountains. The case of Barbara Bollock is officially unsolved, but it's not forgotten. What do you think happened on that mountain? Share your respectful theories in the comments below. If you have any information about the disappearance of Barbara Bollock or the identity of the two men seen on the trail, please contact the Ravalli County Sheriff's Office. Their number is 406-375-4061. Thank you for listening and for helping to keep Barbara's story alive. What you think about this story? Write in the comment your opinion. On my channel, you can watch other revenge or cheating stories. See you soon, my dear viewer.